you really don't need to do anything about it. So. No, not for just plain, tinnitus in both ears. Yeah, the, that's absolutely the right way to think about it. Yeah. Yeah, actually running water like a shower or a waterfall or the ocean is one of the best ways to as far as sound therapy is okay. For just a hearing aid? Um, yes, big four. That's definitely one of the recommended treatments for tinnitus. Again, because you have the hearing loss anyways, and by bringing in more ambient sound that you can hear, you'll notice the tinnitus will be less. The, you're talking about the magnetic treatment? Um, I think the main reason why they did against it is because it's expensive and it hasn't been shown to be effective. And I think some of the reasons why they recommend against it or for something is really based on on cost and and the other thing is the secondary thing would be harmfulness. Some things might not be harmful, but they might just cost you a lot of money and not do anything. Well, Noel could probably answer that better than I can, but I personally like. Maybe I'll just have her answer it. That wasn't what I was going to say. Why there is a brand of hearing aid called the Widex that I've had more experience with than the Oticon, but it's called the Widex Zen, and it amplifies the sound, for hearing purposes, but it also has a little background noise that will mask the tinnitus. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Rosenberg.
I wanted to introduce Noel Crosby. I imagine a lot of y'all know Dr. Crosby, but she did her bachelor's and master's at Florida State. She did her doctorate at the University of Florida. She's been in audiology for 26 years. She's been coming to the annex. This will be her 8th year. She does a great job with the testimonial. I had my hearing checked finally.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Stefan. What? Yeah, and I met Dr. Rosenberg 26 years ago. So I used to work at the Silverstein Institute, and he actually did his fellowship there when I was working there. So that's how we met. So we've known each other for a long time. And we had girls that grew up together and everything. So anyway, so what I'm going to talk about today is cognition and aging. And what do we know about it? Has everyone seen all the literature about brain fitness and brain health? And is that something that people seem to be concerned about recently? It seems like there's more and more literature about that. So it's a big topic. And why is that? Well, because we're living longer. and we have a longer life expectancy, and we're all worried about what's going to happen to our brain. You know, if we start getting forgetful, we get bothered by that. We're worried about it. So dementia and Alzheimer's is a #1 chronic health condition in the older adult. So that's pretty amazing. So we've been really looking, and not we, but just different professions have been looking at what are the causes of dementia and Alzheimer's, what are some things we can do to prevent it, and then of course for me, what's near and dear to my heart, is there a hearing loss link? So I don't know if anyone's seen some of the literature about dementia and hearing loss recently that's been probably about the last 2 or 3 years that's showing that there is a link between dementia and hearing loss, that a mild hearing loss, you're 2 times more likely to develop dementia. With a moderate hearing loss, you'll be 3 times more likely, and with a severe hearing loss, you'll be 5 times more likely. But what does this really mean? Does this mean that if you have a hearing loss that you are going to develop dementia? So we're going to take that a step further and talk about that. So lately, not only dementia, but hearing loss has been linked to heart disease and diabetes and depression and dementia. So there's just been a lot of research that's done lately that's just showing that if you have hearing loss or if you have heart disease, you may be more likely to develop hearing loss. Well, that makes sense because your ear has blood flow to it, and same with diabetes. If the blood flow slows down, you may not hear as well. So what is it with the link with dementia and hearing loss? So there's a couple statements that you could make, and we're just going to take both of those statements and really look at them. The first one is that hearing loss causes cognitive decline, and the second one is that hearing aids prevent dementia. Well, it would be wonderful if the second one was true for all the hearing aid companies and for all the people involved in that field. But what does that really mean? Is there really scientific evidence that shows that? So the first one is hearing loss causes cognitive decline. There's more of a correlation, not really a cause. So there's, again, a link between it. It doesn't mean that if you have a hearing loss, that you're going to have dementia. But I'm going to show you some studies that just indicate that you'll be more likely to not do as well on cognitive tests with the higher degree of hearing loss that you have. So again, there's a link, but we can't say that there is proof that the hearing loss causes that. So one of the studies that was done was a relationship of hearing loss and dementia, and this was a prospective population-based study where they, like what Dr. Rosenberg was talking about, where they take different studies and they look at them and they do a correlation with it. So this shows that on the left side of the graph is a basic cognitive test, the MSR, and the score. So 100% would be the best, and 70 would not be very good. And then across the bottom is the years of hearing loss. And it's showing that as you have more hearing loss, you have more cognitive decline, or you score worse on those tests. So that's one of them. The next study, this is one. Has anyone heard of Frank Lynn? I don't know if anyone's been reading their New York journals. Have you heard of him, Dr. Stephan? That's okay. He's the one that's been doing, John Hopkins had some studies out that was all over all the different newspapers last year about the link between cognitive decline and hearing loss. So he's the MD that's really been looking at that a lot. Do you know him, Dr. Rosenberg? Okay. He's been on the lecture circuit about it and trying to figure out what the link is and everything. So this was a really big study that was done. And again, the same thing. They looked at actually two different tests. So they looked at the the MSR and the score on that, and then they looked at another test because they wanted it to be where there were two different tests, so it wasn't just the one test and maybe that was indicating it versus having the two different measurements. So again, the longer the hearing loss, the worse the cognitive score on the tests. And these tests are like really basic questions, like spell world backwards. What year is it? You have to draw certain things. So there's some real basic questions that gives you a good idea about the person's cognitive ability. And so looking at that, again, it was the same type of link where the longer you had the hearing loss, the worse the score was. And the way that they tested some of this is they didn't actually do audiograms on everyone because it's a longitudinal test. So they pulled data and they looked at whether the person reported a hearing loss or whether the tester was recognizing that the person wasn't hearing, those types of things. But again, there was that link between it. So looking at that, then they started looking at what are some of the things that can prevent Alzheimer's disease and cognitive decline. And this was a study where, again, it was a group of people that reviewed different literature that was done over the years. And this is a 300-something page paper, which I have read through. And it went into a lot of detail, and a lot of this doesn't relate to hearing loss, but it goes into a lot of detail about looking at all different things that may cause dementia, and then what are some of the things that help prevent it. So looking through all of this, they came up with the greatest risks as being diabetes, a genetic predisposition, and it's a certain gene that if you have that gene, you're more likely to develop it, smoking, and depression. So those are the 4 greatest risk factors. And then the 2 greatest protective factors were cognitive engagement and physical activity. So there was another one too that looked at diet. And so there was some indication that if you had more of a Mediterranean type diet, which I don't know if you all know what that is, it's more healthy oils and fish and vegetables and not as much meat, then there was a slight indication of that. But the most important things were the cognitive engagement and the physical activity. All right, so looking at that, we can say there is a link. One doesn't cause the other. But then the next statement that some people would like to make, is that hearing aids prevent dementia. So again, looking at this, when we looked at the other graphs, if we could prove that untreated hearing loss and the poor score on the cognitive function tests with hearing aids would bring somebody back up to that good hearing and the better cognitive scores, then that would be wonderful. But we don't have those studies yet. So right now, a lot of people are looking at taking some studies and now looking at treatment. So the treatment being a hearing aid or some auditory rehabilitation or some brain training, and seeing over time if they can get those numbers to shift. So we don't have that data yet. But it only makes sense to me that if you are hearing things around you and engaging more in the world, because one of the measures was cognitive engagement, if you're able to hear more, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more too, that you would be able to, if you can hear better, you're going to be able to engage more. So one of the statements that one of the hearing aid companies, and this is Auditorium, makes, is that hearing loss is linked to cognitive decline. So when we hear, our brains make sense of the sounds that we hear. And under normal circumstances, we don't think twice about what we're hearing. It's natural. We know somebody's in the other room. We know that there's a sound coming from over here. We know what you're saying. We understand it. Somebody may be talking over there. So when you have normal hearing, you're able to do all that and manage it pretty easily. And it's not hard to do. But what happens is when you have a hearing loss, that's a component that makes all of that harder. So you may have to focus on the person in front of you. You may have to get away from that noise beside you. You may not know that somebody walked right up to you because you didn't hear them. Because of that, it takes more effort for you to focus on just the everyday listening. So the more you have to give your effort and your focus on just listening, the harder it is to work on all those other cognitive things that are happening behind the scenes. It takes more effort. And because it takes more effort, then you may not do as well. So if you have at least hearing aids and you're able to hear better again, then it's going to take less effort to understand what somebody's saying. So my statement that I like to make is that brain training combined with hearing aids may help maintain cognitive function. So what you're doing is you're aiding the hearing loss so the person can now hear what's being said and hear what's going on around them. And then you're also working on different specific activities that help with auditory memory, auditory recall, speed of processing, reaction times, etc. So has anyone seen all the brain fitness information that's been out there, or has anyone tried any of the brain fitness programs? Oh, I'm gonna hope that some of you are gonna do that when I'm finished. Because I've tried a couple of them, but they're all over the place. Has anyone seen Lumosity on when they go onto the internet or? Okay. So anyways, there's one called Posit Science, and this one has been out for a little bit longer than the Lumosity, and their program is called Brain HQ, and what their mission is to help people be at their best throughout their lives by providing brain training software clinically proven to improve cognitive performance. So they have brain training programs available, but they're also doing a lot of research about how they can be helpful in different situations. And they're always looking at how they can make these programs better. This program has a really big auditory component to it, which is what I like about that. The other program that's very popular is Lumosity, and their mission is helping people keep their brains challenged with online tools to allow anyone to exercise core cognitive abilities. So again, this is a program where they're looking at more of a general improvement in all sorts of different skills. And when you see back here, memory, attention, flexibility, speed of processing, and problem solving. Now, does brain training work? It seems that it helps looking at more general improvements than specific skills. Here's some research that has been done that will indicate some of the studies that have been done. And the last one on the right is a hearing aid company that did some research. But their philosophy is that it can't hurt, and they have had studies that have shown that 10 years later, people have some improvement in specific areas. So what are some of the other options for brain fitness? So the two that I talked about are ones that are provided or available for the general population. So you don't necessarily need a hearing loss, or you don't have to have a hearing loss, or it's not for somebody with a hearing loss. The two on the left are for people that have hearing loss. So they're more focused on auditory and speech reading. So the top one that says Read My Quips off to the left is a kind of a new program that's been developed, and it's looking at somebody, so you would go online and you would do it, and somebody would be talking, and they'd give you just a little bit of auditory information, and you have to try to repeat what they're saying by watching the person's lips. So it's a really good way of doing some speech reading. And then the other one is the LACE, which has been around for a while, that focuses a lot of speech and noise. So I would recommend, if you have a hearing loss and you're interested in doing some brain fitness, that you do one on the left and then also one on the right. And then the bottom on the right is a website for a comparison of the two, Lumosity and Brain HQ. I tend to like Brain HQ better because it has more auditory skills that you have to work on. And so for people with hearing loss, that seems to be more helpful. All right, we also look at just the way we communicate is a big factor, and the way that our brain perceives sound and speech. If we talk faster, it's harder to understand. So there's different ways that we look at teaching people how to communicate better to help as well. So that's my information about brain fitness. I'm happy to talk to you about it a little bit more. I'm just going to go through some things that I just think are really important quickly, and then I know I have to wrap it up. So what are some of the things I know for sure after 26 years of being an audiologist? Well, I know the sooner that you get assistance for your hearing loss, the better off you're going to be. I think it's like taking care of your future self. If you wait until your hearing is really bad and then you try to do something about it, you've gone for so many years not hearing. It's like a muscle that atrophies. It gets used to not moving, and then it's harder to get it going again. So the sooner you get assistance, the better off you're going to be. If you don't wear your hearing aids, they cannot help you. I know that. That's a big one. The more you wear your hearing aids, the more your brain gets used to how you hear with them. So a lot of people will get hearing aids and they'll say, well, I go into a noisy place and I can't hear anything, but then I find that they only wear them when they go into a noisy place, and it may only be once a week. So without wearing them all the time, their brain never really gets those new pathways developed where they start hearing better. You really have to take personal responsibility for your hearing loss. You cannot blame your spouse or your wife or your husband or the people that you're talked to at the store. You have to decide that you're going to do something about it and take that personal responsibility and not blame others. Most people hear better with hearing aids, just not as good as they were when they were young. But most people do hear better. Some situations are just more difficult to hear in. If you go into a really noisy restaurant and there's noise all around, you're not going to hear what the person is saying across the table. I'm not going to hear what the person is saying across the table. I think we forget that we used to miss things even when we had normal hearing. A hearing aid doesn't know that some speech, like that person talking over there, is noise, and other speech isn't, because it's designed to amplify speech, so it doesn't know what speech is good and what isn't. Biggie, listening and hearing are two different things. Some people can hear perfectly, but they don't listen. Listening is a skill that you can develop, and it can be the single most important thing you can learn to do. Learning to listen better. It's hard sometimes. A well-fit hearing aid can only help so much. Nothing can correct your hearing back to the way it was when you were young. You have to be willing to do the work to get the most out of your hearing aids. It's like physical therapy for your ears and brain. So if you have to get a hearing aid and also do brain fitness, it's like if you get a new knee, you also have to do physical therapy. There is no magic cure for hearing loss. There's nothing, and if you see the ads that say, oh, this, there is no magic cure for hearing loss. You have to do the work. Hearing aids are so much better than they used to be, but they are still only aids. They can help you hear again, but they cannot correct your hearing. There's a lot of different accessories that you can use now, that you can connect to Bluetooth for your phone and to the TV and have external microphones, but you have to be willing to try them. They can make a big difference. Working with someone who is willing to guide you through this process is priceless. It can be very helpful and important, but ultimately it's up to you. Again, you have to be willing to do the work to get the better hearing. So on that note, we don't want these kinds of things to happen to us all the time. And that will be it. It's about 5 of, so I hope that's okay. Thank you very much.